we are down to the last several questions of our 5.5 to 5.6 quiz review. These are the last types of questions that we'll have on our quiz. So let's take a look. If A is an angle in the first quadrant, which means everything's positive in the first quadrant, sine, cosine, tangent, and B is in the fourth quadrant, which means cosine is positive, as well as secant. We should talk about reciprocals. So cosine and secant. So the reciprocal functions always have the same positive or negative sign as each other. So B is an angle in the fourth quadrant, which means cosine and secant are positive and all the others are negative. We also know that sine of A is 7/25 and cotangent of B is negative 9/40. Find the following. All right, so we want to find cosine of A. And so what we want to do is we want to think, are there any relationships between cosine of A and either of these things that we know? Well, it's not going to be B because cosine A and B aren't related. So is there any relationship between cosine of A and sine of A? And we know that there's a Pythagorean identity. So we can say sine squared of A plus cosine squared of A is equal to 1. That's our Pythagorean identity. Now we know that sine of A is 7/25. So 7/25. But we don't want sine of A, we want sine squared. So this is squared plus cosine squared of A is equal to 1. So we're going to square these. 7 squared is 49. 25 squared, you can use a calculator, that's 625, plus cosine squared A equals. Now we would normally put 1 here. I'm going to go ahead. I see we have a fraction on our left side, so I'm going to kind of think, well, I'm going to multiply by 625 over 625. So we have a denominator of 625. And we would go ahead and subtract 49 6/25 from both sides. So again, now we have to do a subtraction. Maybe you use your calculator. You don't necessarily need to. Cosine squared A, 625 minus 49 is going to be 576 over 625. And we want cosine A, so we have to take the square root of both sides. Normally we put plus or minus, but since A is in the first quadrant, we know it's going to be positive because cosine's positive. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. Now, we don't put this in our calculator, square root of 576 6/25. Go ahead and take the square root of 576 over the square root of 625. Like, do those separately, and you will see that you get 24 over 25. And that is our answer for number 9. And again, normally we put plus or minus here, but we know that it's positive because A is in the first quadrant. All right, let's find sine of B. All right, sine of B. Well, for number 10, we're dealing with B. So is there any relationship between sine and cotangent of B? And honestly, there is not a direct one. So now we have to think through this a little bit. So sometimes what we do is we go ahead and think of a reciprocal. So what's the reciprocal of sine of B? Well, the reciprocal is cosecant. So is there a relationship between cosecant of B and cotangent of B? And there is. There's a Pythagorean identity. And I don't have them. Let's see if we can scroll to it so you can see it. There's a Pythagorean identity. Cotangent squared plus 1 equals cosecant squared. Sorry about that scrolling around. But we know that cotangent squared plus 1 is equal to cosecant squared. And so now we can use this to help us find cosecant of b, and then we can do the reciprocal of it to find the sine of b. So cotangent squared, that's negative 9 over 40 squared plus 1 is equal to cosecant squared b. Negative times a negative is positive, so we have 81 over 40 times 40 is 1,600 plus 1, but I'm just going to go ahead and write this as a common denominator, we want a denominator of 1,600. So there's a form of 1 that will be helpful. So this is 1,681. So we're just adding these fractions over 1,600 equals cosecant squared b. We'll take the square root, thinking plus or minus. Now, as I mentioned before, let's just do the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom, plus or minus. So right now, we have plus or minus the square root of 1,681. If you put that in your calculator, you will get 41. And the square root of 1,600 is just 40. Now, what do we know about angle B? We know angle B is in the fourth quadrant. And we know everything's, and this is talking about sine, cosine, and tangent. So all are positive, sine is positive, tangent's positive, and cosine's positive. So also they're reciprocal. So sine and cosecant are positive, tangent and cotangent are positive in the third, and cosine and secant are positive in the fourth. And so since cosine and secant are positive in the fourth, that means cosecant, the one we're looking for, is negative. So our answer for this cosecant of b is negative 41 over 40. Now that's not what it's asking for number 10. It's asking for the sine of b. And we know that those are reciprocals, so sine of b is negative 40 over 41. Oops, negative 40 over 41. All right, coming to number 11, we want the tangent of b. Well, actually, this is a really easy one because we know that cotangent of b is negative 9/40, and we know the tangent is reciprocal of cotangent. So this is just the reciprocal. So negative 40 over 9. Not even really any work to write for that one. So number 9, we use just the straightforward Pythagorean identity, actually the most well-known one. Number 10, we had to realize sine had to do with, is the reciprocal of cosecant. And cosecant and cotangent are related using this Pythagorean identity. We found cosecant, which helped us find the reciprocal, which is sine. Now on to 12 and 13. Here, this is cosine of a minus b. Well, this is a difference identity. So we're going to be looking at this last one that's typed in here. And we know cosine of a minus b, using that identity, is cosine A, cosine B, plus sine A, sine B. Well, we know several of these. So do we know cosine A? Well, yeah, we found cosine A in number 9. So cosine A is 24 over 25. The whole thing, cosine A. Do not put 24 over 25 in for A. The whole thing, cosine A is 24 over 25. Cosine B. Do we know cosine B? Well, I don't think we know cosine B, so we actually have to do a little bit more work here to find cosine B. There's a few different ways to go about it. we have sine b. So we could use Pythagorean, sine b plus sine squared b plus cosine squared b is equal to 1. That's very familiar to us. We could do that. Another one is we actually we know tangent and we know sine of b. So we know that tangent of b equals sine of b over the cosine of b. So this one might even be better. So tangent of b is negative 40/9. Sine of b is negative 40/41 over cosine of b. Does look a little funny here. Cosine of b is in the denominator, so we have to multiply both sides by cosine b. So these cancel. And then we can multiply both sides of what's left by the reciprocal of, so 9 over negative 40. Sorry, it's getting really cramped in here. We're getting rid of this, so multiplying by 9 over negative 40. And we get the negative 40 cancels with the negative 40, and we get 9 over 41. So that's one way to do it. I actually thought it was going to be easier, but maybe it's just easier to do this, knowing that sine is negative 40/41. So you could have gone through it that way. But regardless, you get 9 over 41. So that was a little bit tricky. We had to go back and find cosine of b. All right, plus sine of a. That actually was given to us here. So 7/25. Sine of b we found here. That was negative 40/41. Now we just have to work through some fractions here. So we're going to multiply 24 times 9. So that's 216. So we have 216, 25 times 41. So we get 1,025. And then we're going to add negative 2. 7 times 40 is 280. And negative 280 plus 216 is negative 64 over 1,025. And that's cosine of a minus b. And lastly, we can find of sine of b minus a. So be careful with this one because it's switched. So it's b minus a. So let's just talk through this carefully. So I'm going to even write it on here. B, A, B, A. So it's going to be sine B cosine A minus cosine B sine A. We actually have all of these already, so this should be pretty easy to do. So sine of B, that's right here, negative 40/41. Cosine A, we found that in number 9. That was 24/25. Minus cosine of B. Cosine of B, we found that did I ever write it anywhere? We worked on it over here. maybe we didn't use it till over here, so that was 9 over 41. And sine of A, 7 over 25. Well, we already multiplied 41 and 25. Hopefully we did it correctly, but so we're going to have a common denominator of 1025. 40 times 24, or actually negative 40 times 24, that's going to be negative 960 minus 9 times 7, which is 63. And so the answer for this one is, subtract those, you get negative 1,023. Oops, got a 0. Over 1,025. So you could just add those 3, 2, add the 1. So 1,023 over 1,025. And there you have the quiz review.